This episode contains details involving the murder of a young child and may be distressing for some. Listener discretion is advised. 13-month-old Zachary Andrew Turner was left in the care of his mother. And it feels like there are a million reasons why he never should have been, and why we, the rest of the world, should never have come to know Zachary, and why we should not be here talking about him today. Welcome back to the tale of Losing Andrew, Losing Zachary, a California Dreaming multi-part series. In part 3, we began to see the early stages of Shirley Turner's mind beginning to spin. How she maneuvered the system. Despite being under indictment for murder, she was released on bail, and how the public welfare system is doing anything and everything to make sure Shirley is well taken care of, as the justice system drags its feet, getting her extradited back to the United States to face the charge that she murdered Andrew Bagby. We left off with Shirley free and pregnant. While Shirley was on bail, she was making a good time of it. She was maintaining an active social life. She's regularly out to dinner, taking in movies, shopping with her son. She was staying with him for a short period of time at his apartment, from November of 2001 when she first fled to Canada until January of 2002. It was over Christmas time that her relationship with her son started to sour, and it didn't take long. She sold his computer that he and some of his friends had custom built for $900. He was still attending university, and of course he needed his computer. This was late 2001, so you can get a basic computer relatively cheap today, but to build one on your own was expensive then, and it still is now expensive. So yeah, if my mom sold my custom computer, I'd be really mad. Her son confided in a family member that he was worried his mom was going to wipe his place out, leaving him with nothing. So for the new year, he traveled to see his paternal grandmother, the one who pretty much raised him. She still lived in Parsons Pond, and before he left St. John's, he told his mom to be out of the apartment before he returned in January. However, when Shirley's son flew back home to St. John's in early January of 2002, his mom had indeed vacated his apartment, but she took his video camcorder with her. She rented a temporary place on January 5th and then moved into a more permanent apartment on January 15th. On January 27th, Shirley began keeping a journal. For my new child conceived October 20th, 2001, to be read when you are much older. On April 30th, 2002, Shirley wrote in this journal, "Someone has taken your dad before he even knew you existed, and now maybe you'll lose me too. I can't bear to think of adoption, but I have to do what's best for you. I don't know what that is. Everything is so uncertain now. I'm trying to be strong to get through this. I've had bad days, awful days, and then not so bad days." By this time, Shirley had little to no contact with her 3 children. Her daughter was still living in Ontario. Her son, well, you know how that fell apart. And her youngest daughter was still living with her dad in Portland Creek. Shirley told her second ex-husband, father of her youngest, that she wanted to see her over the Easter holiday. She would be on break from school for a week. He did not want to allow his daughter to travel to St. John to see Shirley because she was facing such serious criminal charges. He eventually reluctantly agreed that she could go visit with her mom from March 29th until April 7th, 2002, but he wanted the stipulation that Shirley's older daughter go visit as well. Both of her girls arrived in St. John on March 29th, but the older daughter did not stay for very long. They had gotten into an argument, at which time Shirley struck her in the face. Her daughter left and went to the Great North Peninsula to stay with family. Shirley would lie about this incident, telling Children, Youth, and Family Services, or CYFS, that her daughter left to start a job in Toronto. The younger daughter stayed behind, and the day before she was scheduled to go home, Shirley called her dad up and told him that their daughter would be staying with her for good. She technically still had legal custody. She had been granted that legal custody way back when the divorce was finalized on February 21st, 1997. Now, the reasons why Shirley suddenly wanted her daughter to live with her can only really be known to Shirley herself. The speculation is that she might have been worried, since she was facing extradition to the United States, that this might be the only time she'll have to spend with her daughter again. Shirley enrolled her daughter in school in St. John's on April 8, 2002. On April 9th, her father filed an application in United Family Court to vary the parenting order made when they divorced to grant him custody of their daughter. The first hearing was on April 11th. Both mom and dad appeared, but Shirley had no attorney with her, so the hearing was postponed so she could retain an attorney. In the meantime, the court did not make any changes to the February 1997 order giving Shirley custody. But the father was ordered to be given generous access to his daughter. The dad ended up having to give up. The court was an 11-hour drive away. He didn't have the money, nor did he have the time, the resources, or the wherewithal to deal with fighting against Shirley. So he had to let it go. We will find out more why a little bit later on. So how is Shirley surviving? Well, ever since she came back to Newfoundland in November of 2001, she received child-related community services, and she was able to benefit from that by having custody of her youngest daughter now. So that might have been another one of the motivating factors. Having physical custody of her daughter allowed her to take advantage of the community services available. She, of course, is also going to benefit from the baby that she was pregnant with as well. The community and health services in Canada is complex, but at the heart of it is to ensure the best interests of the children are of the utmost importance. This includes providing these services, support, and doing so all under the umbrella of maintaining family preservation. Family preservation. It feels like the right and best thing to do for children. It often takes priority over all else, and in this case, even over murder. Shirley Turner has been described as a puzzle. Her personality. When she went to obtain child services, which began in February of 2002, like a puzzle, her mind was a bunch of oddly shaped pieces forced together to somehow make everything appear normal. In the Turner Review and Investigation, it said, "The personality of Shirley Turner was comparable to a jigsaw puzzle. Her psychological picture was comprised of irregularly shaped pieces. If all of them were located, accumulated, and examined individually, they probably would not have depicted either her delinquent parenting history or her serious dysfunctional psyche. All the pieces having been found and collected together, they needed to be assembled to create a picture. And the resulting picture requires examination, assessment, and analysis to obtain accurate and complete appreciation of the potential harm embedded in Shirley Turner's persona." Child, Youth, and Family Services in St. John's saw some of the puzzling aspects of Shirley. Any one of those pieces was complex, perplexing, and in order to discern what it all meant would be an enormous undertaking. If someone had taken the time to take a real good hard look at Shirley, a true picture of what they were dealing with would have emerged, and it would have become clear that Shirley was a woman that for nearly the entirety of her adult life repeatedly and habitually operated outside the confines of what is socially and legally acceptable, and she frequently posed a substantial risk to her children and their best interests. Providing Shirley with children's services is one thing, but when it came to determining if the children needed protection or required separation from their mother was another. What makes it difficult is that it requires the court to have an extremely high burden of proof to convince a court to declare Shirley's children as needing intervention or separation. And these are some of the roadblocks when it comes to social workers, especially because child welfare tends to be reactive and crisis-driven. Many questions are going to be raised later on, especially when it pertains to the best interest of children. What are the chances that a mother is going to be legally separated from her child by the court? The answer? If the mother is dying or is likely going to die, or for some reason is not going to be able to have contact with their child for the rest of their lives, for example, like going to jail for murder, a plan should be initiated and put in place as soon as possible so the child may start developing attachments and relationships with whomever is going to become the new primary caregiver. This wasn't even something that was taken into consideration with any of the children in Shirley's custody by 2002. Zachary Andrew Turner was born July 18, 2002. We will talk more about him throughout this story. I want to talk more about Child, Youth, and Family Services, and from this point forward, I will call it CYFS. CYFS was providing community services for Shirley Turner and her children. Despite the fact that their mother was facing extradition, they continued to help at every turn. The older child living with her would obviously be sent back to her dad. But what about Zachary? What was the plan for him if or when his mom was sent to jail for killing his dad? CYFS is supposed to make a long-term plan for this situation, aren't they? Well, there is no indication that any consideration had ever been given to separating Shirley and Zachary. Rather, they were interested in providing Shirley with supportive services to help her be the one to have a plan in place for his care to be implemented if and when she was to be extradited to the United States. And we'll go over all of that. So Shirley made a phone call to the intake offices of the CYFS on March 25, 2002. She told the intake office that she and her second husband were in a dispute over their daughter. Now, the second husband did not know this yet, of course. He was still working out the details of sending his daughter to visit with her mom over Easter, which was set to start 4 days after this call. The intake employee told Shirley that CYFS did not provide services in custody matters unless there are concerns over abuse, and Shirley did not say she had any concerns. CYFS did not start a file based on this call, but it does show that Shirley was not planning on giving the daughter back after she asked for her to come stay for a week over Easter holiday. But when Shirley received her ex-husband's application on April 10, 2002, after she told him she was keeping their daughter, she called CYFS again and expressed concerns for her daughter's emotional needs. And Shirley was again told that CYFS does not become involved in custody matters unless the child or children have been abused. So Shirley went there. She told the intake employee that her ex-husband's wife had physically assaulted her daughter on March 8, 2002 at their home in Daniels Harbor, and it was her daughter who told her this. The intake employee screened Shirley's request for emotional support for her daughter now because of this allegation of abuse. The matter was referred to for services to St. John's CYFS, but the matter was deferred until they learned the outcome of the custody application that the dad had submitted. A note made by the St. John's CYFS worker handling this file stated that if the court returned the daughter to her father, she would request action on Shirley's report of abuse. But there was a problem with Shirley's report. She said the abuse happened in Daniels Harbor. The thing is, they were not living in Daniels Harbor. They lived in Portland Creek. So Shirley started over. She called a social worker at CYFS in St. John's and made a new report. She said that her daughter's father had kept her in her bedroom for 4 hours on March 21st, 2002, to discuss her Easter visit. This time, Shirley had established that her daughter was living in Portland Creek. But then I've mentioned that Shirley's ex-husband decided the time, distance, and cost of fighting Shirley, now with these abuse allegations, was a losing battle, and he gave up. Over the next 16 months, CYFS provided services for Shirley and her daughter, and then Zachary when he was born. And many believe this is where there was a severe breakdown in the system. Was the CYFS providing the proper services? And did they thoroughly investigate and assess what was appropriate here with Shirley, her daughter, and now her newborn son? On April 16, 2002, a St. John's CYFS worker called the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary for assistance in looking into Shirley's allegations against her ex-husband that he mistreated their daughter. Okay, so let's quickly review. Within 3 weeks of Shirley calling to allege her ex-husband talked to her daughter for 4 hours in her room about an Easter vacation, the CYFS launches an investigation. But Shirley gives birth to the child of the man that she's under indictment in Pennsylvania for murdering by shooting him 5 times and is facing extradition hearings sometime in the near future, is fully provided with family preservation assistance, with no plan of action in place for Zachary's care if and when the time comes his mother is brought to the United States to face trial for first-degree murder. And a cursory look into Andrew's murder would spell it out very clearly that Shirley was most likely responsible for it. Talk to your daughter in her room versus murdering your unborn baby's daddy? Yeah, let's go after that dad instead of Shirley. That's legit. So the social worker called the constabulary for help investigating Shirley's allegations, but the constabulary referred the social worker to the RCMP because Portland Creek was their jurisdiction. So she called and left a message with them. Next, the social worker went to speak with the guidance counselor at her school along with Shirley's daughter. As it turned out, the daughter was one of the brightest in the class and had a solid place as one of the strongest students when it came to leadership. Yes, Dad spoke to his daughter for 4 hours about her visit with her mother, but she was not kept in her room. Personally, I think 4 hours is the bare minimum when prepping someone to spend 9 days with Shirley Turner, am I right? God, can you imagine how that 4-hour conversation went? How to deal with Shirley? How to cope with her? How to escape her? Well, as it turns out, there was some truth to the allegations against his wife. She did slap the daughter's leg in an attempt to spank her, but it was not a physical assault beyond that. It was the only time the second wife had slapped the daughter. As for the daughter, she seemed to enjoy staying with her mother, but expressed concern about Zachary growing up without a father. When the social worker spoke with Shirley on the phone on April 18, 2002, Shirley was told that they would provide counseling for her daughter, whether the court ordered her to stay with her or go with her dad. The social worker made a separate phone call to the father and the wife and told them that it is their general policy to not use physical discipline because of the physical and emotional impact on the child. By April 29, 2002, Shirley's youngest daughter was set up for counseling primarily to address the issues she may be experiencing surrounding her mother being indicted on murder charges in Pennsylvania, as well as her father requesting custody of her. Despite this intervention, CYFS never really went beyond this when it came to future parenting of Shirley's youngest daughter. That was in the hands of the Unified Family Court. The court was asked to drop the case because of Dad's financial constraints. 2 days later, on May 1, 2002, CYFS was contacted by phone to provide services for Zachary. This was 2.5 months before he was born. However, it was not Shirley that made this call. It was a friend of Shirley's from St. John's. She's referred to in the report as Shirley's St. John's friend. And this would not be the only time someone sought services for Zachary other than Shirley. The woman called and said she was calling on behalf of her friend, Shirley Turner. She said Shirley was expecting a baby in the middle of July and was worried that she was going to be sent to the United States to be tried for murder, and she wants provisions made for the baby. She said that Shirley needs to be able to stand up in court at the extradition proceedings to say that she can place her child in foster care here in Newfoundland. The caller said that Shirley needs someone to help her with the situation and asked that the person who contacts Shirley to be sensitive and non-judgmental because Shirley is very upset. Shirley was spoken to about this matter on May 7, 2002. Shirley couldn't be told quite yet what role their agency would have in that, but suggested that family members are considered when it comes to the placement of a child in a situation such as Zachary's. She also addressed whether or not Andrew Bagby's parents would apply for custody of him. Shirley told the social worker that the Bagbys have said they want a paternity test done, so she's not sure if they will play an active role in Zachary's life yet. She also questioned if the Bagbys would have temporary custody and if they would be able to take Zachary to California where they reside. The social worker suggested Shirley consult an attorney about that. Shirley left a voicemail with the social worker on June 11, 2002, and said she may want to discuss adoption options as well in regards to the baby that she was expecting. On June 17, 2002, a St. John's CYFS director received a visit from a local attorney representing David and Kathleen Bagby. The lawyer told the director that the Bagbys were considering an application for custody of Shirley's baby, and if the application was unsuccessful, they would want access. The lawyer also told the director that the Bagbys were considering an application for custody of Shirley's baby, and if the application was unsuccessful, they would want access. The lawyer also said that the Bagbys were prepared to relocate to Newfoundland or Pennsylvania in order to have a parenting role in the life of the expected child. And with that, we have our very first glimpse into how incredibly amazing David and Kathleen Bagby were and remained throughout this entire ordeal that this woman was putting them through. Once the Bagbys made their presence known, the CYFS director and the social worker who had been working with Shirley had a meeting. The social worker was told that she needed to start investigating this case. She started talking with all 3 of Shirley's children, but the only one she was able to reach was Shirley's youngest daughter. She called her school on June 18, 2002, and spoke to her guidance counselor and ascertained that Shirley's youngest was an amazing child who was excelling in school. This call was followed up by a visit where she spoke to Shirley's daughter directly. She noted that the girl was articulate and animated as they spoke. She told the worker she was getting counseling and had more visits scheduled with her dad later in the month and in August. Remember, she's living full-time with Shirley. She said that if her mom goes to jail, she would like to go back and live with her dad. The social worker next spoke to the constabulary who were working and assisting the Pennsylvania state troopers in their investigation into Andrew's murder. She learned the following information: that there was no evidence that Shirley had previously abused any of the children, which is not fully true. There was an allegation in 1993 that was never investigated, and she allowed her 15-year-old to run off to another province to be with a boyfriend, but okay. So the social worker was unable to ascertain whether or not Shirley had ever undergone any mental health diagnoses, which is lazy if you ask me, because she's been under psychiatric observation and has at least one documented suicide attempt that was very, very dramatic. It would only take a few phone calls and interviews with any one of Shirley's ex-boyfriends to see that there was something deeply disturbing about this woman. The social worker also found out that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania decided not to seek the death penalty if Shirley were to be extradited to face the murder charges and convicted. I wonder if any of them thought this decision not to pursue the death penalty meant that they already considered mitigating circumstances in Shirley's case. Did Canadian officials think the United States was going easy on Shirley? I hope they didn't think that. But we all know that she would not be extradited if the death penalty was looming. But still, it should have been all the more reason for Shirley to be sent back to answer to the charges without all this handling of her with kid gloves. I understand why everyone is trying to help Shirley, but it doesn't take much digging to find out what kind of unstable person that they are dealing with here and that she needed to be handled differently. The constable did say that the children are all Shirley has left that's keeping her from being extradited to the States, and it was his belief that Shirley could harm herself or the unborn child if she was at risk of losing the child. This was quite a prophetic statement, yet the social worker did not seem to pursue any further into the constable's opinion. He essentially predicted the future. Shirley could harm herself or the unborn child if she was at risk of losing the child. Those words, seeing those words that had been spoken 1 month prior to Zachary entering this world, is absolutely soul-crushing. Why was nobody listening? Why was everybody so blind? I don't understand this. The social worker also found out that she needed to get Shirley's permission to talk to her psychiatrist. The CYFS was only aware of her ever consulting one psychiatrist to start seeing Shirley on November 10th, 2002. And he was one of the ones who signed the promise to pay the $65,000 sureties on Shirley's bail, Dr. Doucette. Clearly, this doctor is not going to be able to provide any semblance of an accurate assessment of Shirley's state of mind, and has overstepped his professional boundaries by agreeing to pay a large portion of her bail should Shirley fail to appear. But Shirley did give written permission for CYFS to speak to Dr. Doucette, but he was never interviewed. Several phone calls were made. He never returned any of them, and the social worker gave up trying to reach him. This is yet another huge warning that something very serious is going on here. If this is the response that CYFS is getting into their investigation into Shirley Turner. Dr. Doucette is a professional. He's involved in a very serious case here, more involved than he should be. Shirley had given her permission for him to speak out about her, yet he ignores the calls from the social worker, the person advocating on behalf of the children. This is totally wrong all around here on every level. The last thing the social worker needed to do was assess Shirley's ability to parent, especially with the stress that she was under with this extradition and murder charges hanging over her head. I'm sorry, but what agency is going to give a parent under indictment for murder unsupervised access to the child of the victim? What if Lori Vallow suddenly made bail and appeared with her kids? And Child Protective Services was like, okay, cool. Let's do everything we can to facilitate family unification and preservation. How messed up would that be? That would never happen. It's just these two cases have these weird parallels, and it makes you wish that someone would have done something differently for Zachary. Oh, and by the way, I also need to clear up a mistake I made. In an earlier episode in this series, I said that Lori Vallow's bail that would needed to be put up was $50,000. It's actually $500,000. It's 10% of the bail. So $50,000 is 10% of $500,000. $500,000 is 10% of $5 million. I never claimed to be an expert at math, okay? Anyway, back to our story. With the social worker and Shirley, it gets worse. As the social worker assessed Shirley, she did so by mostly talking to Shirley. She didn't seek out anyone Shirley was romantically involved with, the previous boyfriends that she stalked. anyone who knew how Shirley consistently abandoned her role as a mother, anyone close to Andrew, her alleged victim, most of whom were doctors too, colleagues who worked with her both before she began practicing medicine and after. Just speaking to her residency supervisors would have given a tremendous amount of insight. But the social worker didn't do that. According to the Turner report, no other significant investigation was performed beyond speaking to Shirley herself. And that's another ball dropped. The social worker spoke to Shirley by phone on June 18, 2002. She was 8 months pregnant. Shirley told her that she was emotionally drained by the proceedings to extradite her, and it would be nice for her to not be in court pregnant because there was so much hate there with Andrew's parents in court. She said that they're there even though they do not believe the baby is Andrew's. She says it's hard to sit there with so much hatred. But this isn't exactly true. Now, the Bagbys, of course, are not fans of Shirley's, but they never denied Zachary's was Andrew's. They always said they didn't know the paternity of the baby and wanted a test conducted to clear that up. And even if the paternity test proved Zachary was not their grandson, they were prepared to participate in raising the child either as his guardian or with access to him. How insanely amazing are these people? Even if Zachary wasn't Andrew's, they wanted him. I'm beyond words at this point when it comes to Mr. and Mrs. Bagby. Shirley told the social worker that she was worried that the Bagbys would decide that they wanted the baby because she questioned his safety if he was living with them. And that is really rich coming from her. This is another thing that should have sent warning signs flying up all over the place. The woman accused of killing their son is saying she's worried about them and her son's safety in the care of her victim's parents. They've completely dropped everything to come to Newfoundland. I mean, I've been whining about moving from California to Nevada for a month now. One stupid state over. And the Bagbys had not a moment of hesitation in leaving California behind to relocate clear across the continent, just about as far east as you can go in North America, to fight for that baby. Shirley made it clear that she wanted to speak to someone about making arrangements other than the Bagbys to care for Zachary, other than the people who are showing the most interest and passion for it. Anybody but them, as far as Shirley's concerned. This should have been deemed a very troubling thing coming from Shirley. This is a clear indicator of the levels of control Shirley intended to wield over Zachary's life. She robbed the Bagbys of their only son, and she would not stand by and allow them the pleasure of having their grandson. This wasn't about Zachary or the Bagbys. This was about control. Anybody could see the best place, the right place for Zachary was to be in the loving arms of Kathleen and David. They knew that he was a gift meant for them. Nothing could ease the loss of Andrew, but Zachary could have and would have done a hell of a job helping. Shirley said it would not be healthy or in Zachary's best interest to be placed with the Bagbys because they're so convinced that she killed their son. When it came to her own family, there was nobody she would recommend to take the baby. That being said, Shirley wanted more information about the foster care and adoption systems if she were taken into custody in Newfoundland or returned to Pennsylvania. The social worker agreed to look into these options for Shirley and started looking into the development of a placement plan for Zachary. But Shirley had no intentions on waiting for the social worker to handle a placement plan. And this is Shirley's need for control once again. She is using her pregnancy and Zachary as a pawn here to manipulate the system and prolong the process of justice being had for Andrew. That same day she told the social worker she wanted to work out a plan for placement, she herself made contact with the provincial director. In doing so, Shirley acted like she had no idea what services were being offered by the department. Then she had a friend of hers in St. John's call for help. That friend called a co-worker and asked for the home phone number of the director. This co-worker had this information because she was the director's sister-in-law. The co-worker called the director and asked if it was okay to pass her number on to Shirley's friend, to which she consented. Shirley's friend then called the provincial director at home. She was reaching out to help Shirley because Shirley had no support, apparently. She did not know if Shirley committed the murder that she was being accused of, but felt Shirley needed support because she was pregnant. She related that Shirley's family had turned their backs on her, and this was patently false, and yet another illustration as to Shirley's aversion to the truth. In the report, I liked how it was worded. Shirley's propensity for massaging the truth in dealings with virtually everyone interviewed in both the public and private sectors, not to mention in court. Her lack of honesty throughout the period she lived in Newfoundland seriously inhibited the investigation into her when looking at the facts. Shirley's friend told the provincial director that Shirley had seen someone at the Human Rights Commission who had recommended to her that she see only him, the director, about her concerns about the baby. The director got Shirley's number from this friend and immediately called her, and it was her understanding that Shirley was very, very upset and that it was important to get a hold of her as quickly as possible. The director called Shirley on June 18, 2002, but noted that Shirley was not upset but rather calm. On June 21st, Shirley spoke with the CYFS social worker about a plan for placement options for the baby. There are so many different possibilities, Shirley noted, but none of them would have any involvement on the part of the Bagbys, of course. The social worker asked Shirley to prepare a list of people that she wished the worker to contact in order to begin to work on a plan for the baby. At the same time, Shirley's youngest daughter met with a family services counselor employed by the board. She told this counselor that historically she's lived with her father because her mother, Shirley, found it too difficult to raise her children. She couldn't handle it. The daughter sadly expressed a desire to stay with her mother until she was made to go to the United States because it was her desire to spend as much time with Shirley as possible. Said no one ever, right? I'm sorry, but this is just so heartbreaking. And these children, at least this youngest one, clearly loved Shirley. And sadly, it's not the love that Shirley wanted or cared for. And in addition, hello, this child is telling the counselor that it's always been too hard on her mom to take care of her kids. And it's yet another huge warning sign that Shirley is clearly not fit to be caring for Zachary. Right now, of course, Shirley is pretending she wants to look for other options for Zachary, such as foster care or adoption. But Shirley doesn't want that. Zachary is her bargaining chip. She's working the system every which way she can for her own self-serving purposes. The only thing bringing Shirley any sympathy and willingness from people to help, even from the Bagbys, is that little baby Zachary. Shirley told the director that she was worried about her unborn child and wanted to explore options available to her. She also told the director at this time that it was her intentions to name the boy Zachary, and she began referring to him as such from that point forward. She wanted to familiarize herself with the specifics of the services that may help her in meeting Zachary's needs. She said she intended to breastfeed, but was worried that at any time during the extradition hearing, she could be confined to a prison for a period of time, and she would need to have a plan in place for Zachary. The director told Shirley that should the CYFS assume care of Zachary, it would require the director to seek placement with a relative or significant other as the first option. Shirley was asked if there were any relatives who would be receptive to providing care for Zachary. Shirley said that the paternal grandparents would be interested, but she would not stand in support of him being placed with them. When the director asked Shirley why she would not be supportive of the grandparents caring for Zachary, Shirley provided two reasons. One is Shirley said the grandparents had requested DNA testing to prove that the baby was the child of their son, and that their refusal to accept Zachary as Andrew's son was upsetting to her. And we know that this is demonstrably untrue because they've said no matter what the paternity test revealed, that they would step up and care for the baby. And 2, she's opposed to the Bagbys parenting her child because she feared that they would harm Zachary, which is a crock of shit, and I'm even offended just reading that off to you listening. Shirley explained that Mr. and Mrs. Bagby believed that she had killed their son, and she feared as a way of getting back at her that they would harm Zachary. There is absolutely no evidence to support that any of these ridiculous allegations that Shirley is making against the Bagbys is true. In fact, the author of the Turner Report said that these suspicions of Shirley's are absurd, based on what Shirley knows of the Bagbys, and frankly what the entire world knows of the Bagbys. Shirley's absolute insane need to lord over Zachary's life and use him for her own selfish gain is all this is. I doubt anyone did, but I hope to God that nobody actually believed these falsehoods about the Bagbys. Shirley, after expressing her suspicions that the Bagbys' ulterior motives for wanting custody of Zachary, she was quick to point out that she did not kill Andrew. She said that it wasn't up to her to prove her innocence. It was up to the Crown to prove her guilt. I'm sorry, but the Crown has got nothing to do with this. She was coming down to Pennsylvania, and they were not going to be holding her hand and babying her all the way through this process. Her ass would have been nailed to the wall here in the United States, and she knew it. Well, anyway, the director told Shirley that she heard what she is saying about the Bagbys, but if they did indeed approach her to provide care for Zachary, she would have to assess them. She told Shirley that if she continues to have strong feelings against this placement, then the matter would likely end up in court, and a judge would have to make the decision. Shirley said that she believed the Bagbys were going to seek custody of the baby as soon as he was born, but the director reiterated that the decision regarding custody would be in the hands of the court, and she and the CYFS would have no say-so. Shirley then turned to asking questions about foster placements and if she could have input in the selection of placement for Zachary. She was told that this was possible, and Shirley said she wanted to have placement in the eastern region because if she was sent to prison, it would be in Clarenville, way far east on the Newfoundland island. She said that if Zachary was placed in a foster home near the prison, she could continue to breastfeed him. Shirley was told that a foster home in the area could be explored. Shirley said she would like to meet the foster parents before any placement took place. And she also said that if she was extradited to the United States, she has a friend there that would take care of Zachary. But then after she mulled over the idea for a minute, she thought it might not be such a good idea for Zachary to be raised in the United States. She also didn't think her friend would be a good mother. Her friend is a single woman who is also a doctor and thinks that her lack of experience and hectic work schedule would keep her from being a good parent. Come on. It's like this woman is a doctor. I think she'll figure it out. And I'm fairly certain this woman would not jump into the bay with the baby strapped to her if she's having a bad day. So I don't even know why Shirley is entertaining the idea or tossing the idea around if she's not even serious about it. It's probably just to feign genuine concern and interest in Zachary's future and his well-being. All of it is abundantly disingenuous to me. Next, Shirley revisited the topic of adoption. She wanted to know if she decided to place Zachary up for adoption, could she have input in the adoptive parents selected for him? Shirley was told that she could have input into the adoptive parents, and she would also be provided with the profiles of 3 adoptive families from whom she could choose. She was also told that she could provide a list of characteristics she would be looking for in prospective adoptive parents, and that they would match those as closely as possible in the profiles. Then Shirley circled back and said that her current plan was to raise Zachary herself, but if she were to be extradited to the United States to stand trial for murder, she may consider adoption for her son. Shirley was told again that if a relative came forward expressing interest in adoption, that the provincial doctor would have to consider the relative's adoption application first. The director made it clear that long-term foster care was not an option for Zachary, and that if he were placed in the continuous custody of the CYFS, the director would have the authority to make a permanent plan for Zachary, and that could include adoption. On July 9, 2002, Shirley told a CYFS social worker that she wanted to make a voluntary care agreement for Zachary in the event of her incarceration, because of her understanding that she will have a say in what happens to him, because then he would be voluntarily coming into the care of the board CYFS director in region. She wanted to know if the Bagbys had to be notified at all if she were to place the child with the CYFS under the form of agreement she preferred. Shirley gave no thought to the Bagbys as temporary caregivers, which would not have required any form of agreement involving the CYFS. She was perfectly happy to rely on a competent, state-approved individual completely unrelated to Zachary to be taking over his care should she be taken into custody. In preparation for going into the hospital to give birth to Zachary, it was Shirley's intention to send her younger daughter, still residing with her, to stay with her 20-year-old son, along with the help of his neighbors. On July 16, 2002, just 2 days before Zachary's birth, Shirley was visited by her social worker with the intent to introduce her to the new social worker who was going to be taking over her case. Shirley spoke to the new worker at length about the pending criminal charges in Pennsylvania, and her main defense was that there was no forensic or physical evidence linking her to the murder. All the evidence was circumstantial and hearsay. There had been one noteworthy investigation into Shirley's family, and it only included her youngest daughter and Zachary. Even though they had access to the rest of her family, nobody else was spoken to or investigated. What was known about Shirley and the Bagbys was mostly derived from the media or from Shirley talking about her own damn self, and we know you can only believe about 0% of what comes out of her mouth. The Bagbys were completely transparent in speaking about themselves, their backgrounds, and their lives with the media and to counselors. The same could absolutely not be said about Shirley Turner. The reasons why considerably more probing into Shirley's past and present was not performed by CYFS has been revealed in interviews conducted with some of the CYFS social workers, supervisors, and the regional director who were responsible for the Turner file. And it is thousands and thousands of pages of interviews. And here are some of the answers to the tough questions that they were subjected to. Was there ever what used to be called a social history, or what is described more recently as a comprehensive written report regarding Shirley Turner, while the matter was in the hands of a social worker under your supervision? Answer: no, it wasn't. What was the reason for that? Answer: I guess we based our ongoing work with Shirley on the information we had. We knew she was married. We knew she had older children. We knew she hadn't parented her older children for some time. Her history was, I guess, not that unusual based on other families we work with regards to her life history and growing up, being married and having kids, getting divorced. These kinds of things are pretty normal. We don't have the resources, I guess, to be doing these kinds of really formal background history, social histories on families. We definitely don't. Okay, so far we have a lot of guessing here and a lot of blaming a lack of resources for not investigating Shirley extensively. When you say you don't have the resources either because of time constraints or limits on the number of workers you have, answer: right. Looking back on your dealings with Shirley, is it your impression now that you would or would not have gotten her cooperation to elicit from her, by way of interview or documentation, the types of information you would have needed for an intensive and comprehensive assessment? Answer: My attempts to obtain information from her about her personal history were not successful in terms of getting any kind of real, in-depth information about her background or her childhood. Did you find her evasive, reluctant, silent? How would you describe her reaction when you made efforts to garner that information? Answer: I would say reluctant. So a regional director testified about the social worker conducting an investigation from the child protective perspective into Shirley. Was it expected beyond the specific points of the action plan that you have approved to investigate Shirley Turner that the social worker would use her discretion as to whether she contacted other potential relevant sources of information? Or was it expected that she would limit herself to the particular contacts that had been agreed upon at a June 17, 2002 CYFS meeting? Answer: no. She absolutely, as a professional, would use her own discretion and professional judgment around whether or not there were other contacts that she believed needed to be made in addition to those that I highlighted. Did you, in the course of your region's handling of the Shirley Turner file, receive any specific directions on how the case should be handled from anyone senior to you in the region or from elsewhere within the government? Answer: no. Do you know whether your field staff or supervisors read the legal file at the court, the custody access dispute file, or any documents from that file? Answer: I am not aware that occurred. Was there a place in 2002 to 2003, or is there now, any formal understanding, policy, or direction that CYFS not become too actively involved in any child protection investigation where the criminal justice or police investigation is already underway for fear that the CYFS involvement could contaminate the gathering of evidence? Answer: I don't think it is as direct as you have stated. I think that there is some reluctance to share information with CYFS staff by the Crown and by the police agencies where there is a current criminal matter underway. Did the fact that there was an investigation underway both in the United States and Canada relating to Shirley Turner in any way impede the work of the regional board in relation to Shirley Turner and her son Zachary? Answer: we were provided with some of the information that arose from the investigation. What was provided to us was the information which is our file, which is very vague and was not more than what was known through the media. Basically, that is what we knew through CYFS. Is there an expectation that if a person had information about a particular child who was a subject of a referral for services, that they would come forward with that information to you? Or was it your expectation that you'd have to identify from the parent of the child, for example, that the child or the mother might be under medical care or that the matter already involves the police? Would you expect to be volunteered that information, or would you expect to have to go looking for it? Answer: I would expect that information to be volunteered by nature of the fact that a client has the right to confidentiality. I would not necessarily go up to their family doctor just by doing that. Then the assumption is that they're involved with our agency. So in terms of their confidentiality, I wouldn't necessarily do that. Was there any effort made, to your knowledge, to attempt to identify the strength of the prospect of extraction and the strength of the murder charges against Shirley Turner? Answer: as a part of my role in the assessment of Shirley Turner file, I had ongoing contact with the police. I might have, in conversation on anything, said any updates, what's happening, that kind of thing. Details on the extradition hearing itself, I'm sure you know people sort of had this gut feeling, but nothing that people around here, like the constabulary, for example, could say definitively that we had something from which we could say, okay, we have enough to remove Zachary. So dreamers, let me see if I'm picking up what they're putting down. This is all after the fact stuff, when it's too late to do anything about this tragedy. The question was asked, Did you check out what Shirley was facing? Did you look at the case? Did you understand the magnitude of what she was being accused of? And after a little runaround, the answer was, yeah, the case was asked about, so how's about them murder charges on Shirley Turner? Oh, you're working on it? Cool, yeah. We don't have enough to remove Zachary. Next. Was there an effort made to contact state troopers investigating Andrew Bagby's murder, either through approaching your departmental legal counsel or through counterparts in the state of Pennsylvania, social services agencies in Pennsylvania, to identify the particulars of the alleged murder? Answer: in my mind, that would have been the criminal aspect of things, and I would have left that to the police in terms of that being their expertise. And if they had anything that, was specific to me in terms of child protection, I would have expected that they would have shared that information with me. Okay, so they needed the police to tell them if a newborn baby might possibly be in danger in the care of a suspected murderer with a disturbing history. Okay. So question: did you contact them? Answer: I did not contact social services in the United States because I did not believe Shirley had any other children in her care while she was in the States. I didn't ask, not through the States, because, to be honest with you, I wouldn't even know where to begin to get a phone number from them. I did through my contacts through the constabulary say, can you run a check on Shirley in the States to see if there was any criminal history there? And was there none indicated? Answer: there was none indicated. Would not the fact that there was a homicide allegation prompt the worker to perhaps be somewhat more vigilant and skeptical in accepting information from this person, meaning Shirley, in making a judgment call? Answer: I operated from the assumption that everyone has certain rights and freedoms, as you well know, under the Charter, and one of them is that you are innocent until you are proven guilty. I don't presume guilty, and if the public thinks that there are no parents out there, convicted or charged, who are caring for their children, then we are in trouble because it happens every day. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm saying that's the way it has evolved over time. Did we think about it? Sure we did. It's not every day you get a case like that, although you do get them. We got the information we felt we needed to get. Child welfare cannot be the sole protector to children. We can't be soldiers of children. So if the federal Crown's office and the constabulary or Shirley's psychiatrist or the medical school, which I understand had information on her, or any of her friends or the second ex-husband who was married to her and consented in family court to let her keep the younger daughter, if none of these people contacted our agency or saw fit to contact us, I'm not saying that we wouldn't contact them if we had a concern or an issue, but I also think it's incumbent upon the community, professional or otherwise, to not let that be our job to do that. Not just because of duty to report under the Act, but because it's their responsibility as a citizen. So dreamers, while I don't disagree with what this person is saying about reporting, but many people went to law enforcement with concerns about Shirley for many, many years. And in this statement, in this last answer, the social worker was contradictory when it was stated, quote, I don't presume guilty, and if the public thinks that there are no parents out there convicted or charged who are caring for children, then we're in trouble because it happens every day. And in regards to Shirley's case, that statement was followed up with, did we think about it? Sure we did. It's not every day you get a case like that. No, you don't get cases like Shirley's every day, do you? Question: were there ever any discussions between the assessment social worker and you surrounding Shirley Turner's mental health, other than whatever discussion you had on the issue of contacting her psychiatrist? Answer: the file indicates that the social worker had talked to me about the anxiety and stress that Shirley was undergoing at the time, and of course, we were concerned about that. We felt that her mental health issues were being managed by her psychiatrist. Do you experience some loss of faith regarding the willingness of the public to come forward with information that may be relevant in child-related cases, considering the amount of information that has emerged, of which clearly the region was not aware? Answer: well, it doesn't surprise me based on my own practice experience. Is that so? Answer: I do believe that a lot of literature supports what I'm saying, that the public really does think it's our job to protect all children, that they don't have to play a role, which is really sad and unfortunate, considering that new legislation was supposed to be about empowerment and engagement of not only children, youth, and families, but community as well. So yeah, there's a lot of lost faith, really. That has just been a reality, I think. People are afraid of it too, you know. So to summarize in the Turner report, it said, inquiries of independent sources of information is rudimentary and essential best practices for social workers in developing profiles of the people they deal with. The scope and extent of the inquiries should depend on the circumstances of each file. If, for example, little is known about the parent and/or children, which was the situation here apparently, then it would be expected that the inquiries be more intensive and extensive than otherwise, especially if the parent has recently been charged with a serious crime. The lack of the public's willingness to serve as informants about the alleged child mistreatment, acknowledged by one of the social worker witnesses, simply reinforces and heightens the obligation on child protection workers to be vigilant and painstaking in mapping and vigorously performing background inquiries. Those inquiries should and could have been done, but were not done in handling the Shirley Turner file, which may have contributed to tragic consequences for defenseless Zachary Turner. What should not be forgotten nor overlooked is that the undisputed and indisputable constitutional rights under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms of Shirley Turner, in responding to criminal charges against her, are trumped to the extent essential to protect her children, especially her infant son. Charter constitutional rights were never intended to protect a parent at the expense of exposing the parent's children to risk. We will end part 4 here. In part 5, we will pick back up at the birth of Zachary Turner. That will be available soon. I've been saying the wait's not going to be long, but I did need to take a couple days off to pack. We will be wrapping up the tale of losing Zachary this week. Until next time, sweet dreams.